All right, guys, welcome back to the Pure Athlete Podcast. Super excited to continue to have just great guests on to continue to build the resources as we continue to hit on every single podcast. This is all about giving student athletes and their parents the opportunity to get questions answered, but provide them resources with people they can trust. And if we can be on the front end of that, whether it's in person locally or as we begin to travel and do some things for teams around the country, we're going to bring people in like our guest today, Dr. Chelsea, with just to be able to give, again, more information from different perspectives. So before we introduce Dr. Chelsea, I do want to encourage everybody, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. We're going to give you some ways that you can follow Dr. Chelsea as well. So make sure you keep a lookout for that as we'll add that to the comments and create hopefully a little bit of a conversation around that. But so go ahead and like, subscribe, give us some feedback and some input on this episode and watch some of the other ones as we continue to have our Friday drops of just more and more educators and healthcare professionals. So super awesome. Without further ado, Dr. Chelsea, thank you for having us on, or thank you for coming on and being with us. We could do this.
Hi. We could totally do it both ways. Thank you for having me. Happy to talk with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's just jump in. We've been following you for a while and it's kind of been vice versa, but love what you're putting out as far as the resources. I'm going to let you spill the beans on what you do and kind of introduce yourself. But thanks again for having us on. Tell us who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing.
Wonderful. Well, hi, I'm Dr. Chelsea. I am a social psychologist. I really work with athletes as a mental performance coach. So helping athletes reach their full potential when it's time to compete by focusing on positive mental skills. So helping athletes with things like confidence and resilience, burnout, motivation, leadership, all of that falls into the mental performance side. Since, athletes, we train so hard for a very small window of actual performance. So working on the mental aspect with athletes. I'm also a college professor, but I love spending my time basically teaching and coaching on the mental aspects of sport.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's one of the well, we have 3 pillars as a part of the Pure Athlete, which I'm sure you've kind of latched onto a little bit, but physical, mental, and relationships are really the three pillars that we like to focus on. And I think this is a very much needed and really underserved, underrated area, which is why we're reaching out to people like yourself. And since we are so heavy dance right now, as we kind of told you before we came on the air, I married a dancer. I've hired an athletic trainer who's a dancer and coach now. But across athletics in general too, it's so great to have people like you. And I've hawked your Instagram and some of the resources you have out there. You've done a great job, and that's what really drew us to you. Is the content that you're putting out is very genuine and incredible and incredible. And hopefully people can continue to seek you out. How can people find you before we get too far in? How can people find you and interact with you if necessary?
Sure. Probably the easiest way for listening to the podcast and enjoying is I have my show. It's called Passion for Dance. It does focus more on the dancer side, specifically for the coaches and the teachers. But I've had lots of coaches from other sports who've enjoyed it as well. But it is dance focused, Passion for Dance. And then otherwise, as you said, my Instagram's probably where I try to put out as much free content and be as helpful as possible there too. Just my name, Dr.Chelsea Pierotti.
Nice.
Love it. Yeah, I've been following you for years, so it's pretty cool. Yeah. So how did you decide this what you're gonna do with your life? You talked about before we come on the air. You were like, I had that moment too. Walk us through that.
Oh, sure. So I really led to what felt like very parallel lives. For a long time, there were 2 different things. There was the athlete dancer side of my life, and there was the academic side of my life. So on the athlete side, I grew up a studio dancer and all the traditional things that come with that, way too many hours over training, a lot of passion, way too many competitions. So studio dancer. And then I fell in love with ballet. I did a lot of summer apprenticeships in ballet companies. I was a professional ballet dancer for a little while. And then I had that parallel life issue where I cared a lot about my academic path. It's like, I can't do both of these. So I started focusing on the academic side. And so, trying to make both of those work together, essentially. So I was pursuing a degree in psychology, kept going all the way to the PhD that I now have in sport psychology. but was coaching dance all the way along too. But they were separate things. It was like, I'm a coach because that's fun and it's my passion and I love it. But my like career is going to be a professor.
Mhm.
And then until about 2016, they kind of started to blend together. And I realized I could do both and take the academic world to kind of a broader audience, because
Mhm.
academia traditionally is like, the old saying, it's like behind the ivy tower, like the research doesn't get out there, people don't talk about it. So I really wanted to take, pull back the curtain, like what is going on that the research is telling us, and what does that mean to an actual dancer, to a real teacher, to a coach who's in the studio right now? Like, how do you take that and use it? So now I get to combine the two, but it took me a while to figure out how to do that, as you were saying, but I made it.
Yeah.
You have,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Where did you grow up? Where'd you grow up? And then where'd you end up going to school?
So I was born in Boulder, Colorado, and I have never left.
Oh, okay.
I've been very fortunate in a lot of decisions. And then when grad schools were, accepting, that I got to stay in Colorado. So I went to 3 different schools in Colorado, but I have stayed here the whole time. My undergrad was University of Colorado at Boulder, and that's where I currently teach. So I was able to stay here, which has been a dream. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
It's how long? When did you graduate with your doctorate?
Doctorate was 2014.
2014. That's
Yeah.
about the time I started mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's as we've continued, I mean, again, not only just across athletics, but as we see a lot of dancers now. This is something that we're super passionate about, because as we dive into, I want to dive into a couple things that you really almost let you lead this conversation of kind of what you want people to know about you. I want you to kind of mix in, let me say this, lead with what it is you do now pretty specifically, and then kind of go through a couple bullet points of your burnout, confidence, growth mindset, and then kind of lead us down that trail and what it is you're doing with that now.
Sure. So what I'm doing in a consulting place has kind of two different arms to it. So on one hand, I have workshops that are primarily with teams as opposed to individual dancers. And those teams are either school-based or all-star teams. I've gone into studios, kind of every aspect of dance, but with the whole program, usually the competitive programs. So those workshops are both virtual and in person, but they're usually focused on one mental skill. And then we really dig deep into that. So we'll do one session just on, the team unity part, creating a team, team values and good goal setting, because that's usually not done super well. So explaining, really good goal setting, what kinds of goals you should have as a competitive dancer and that stuff. And then, or like just on growth and fixed mindset, perfectionism. So we pick one topic and really drill in on that. So there's that like dancer focused side directly to the athlete. And then the other arm is I have a membership for coaches and teachers. And so that's really focused on educating the educators on how to take positive mental skills and put it into your classroom every day. So there's the two sides, the dancer side and the coach side.
Yeah, that's probably, you can probably speak on that more, being on both sides. I love pouring into the students, like you said, or the student athletes that we see, and then just as much, I'm trying to figure out, much like you, it is that two sides of student athlete, and then but I also want to, I like the leadership from the top, and how can we kind of change the game and conversation on what it is we do. We just had a sports psychologist on, Will. He's also a Navy SEAL, and some of the things that he talked about was very on par with what we're doing too, and trying to get out that, the perfectionism and how you treat yourself, but also coaching from the top down. Like, how do you speak on that versus press, or more time, more practice, and how do you speak through into the coaches so they can get to the kids too from a place of authority, and how they're leading their team.
Yeah, I think something that I want us to dive more into is the mental toughness stuff that you talk about. I mean, I just got back from UDA High School Nationals. That's why my voice sounds like this. But I think that's a huge thing that doesn't really get talked about until it's time to talk about it. It's time to use the skills. So yeah, I would love to talk about that too.
Sure. Oh, and you're right in that it's usually late in the game.
Yeah.
Right. Like people will reach out, if UDA Nationals is in January and I get, people will talk about it over the holiday break. Like, okay, we're gearing up for nationals. What do we need to do? And I'm like, oh, talk to me in June is what you need to do.
No, literally. Yes.
And it's not that you can't do anything in those last 2 weeks. You totally can, but it's really, it's an everyday small pieces, not like, oh, I love my workshops and I think they're very valuable, but they're a one-off. They're not going to dramatically change everything unless you're implementing it every day. It has to, be returned to. So from teaching mental toughness, I guess one tip or my approach to it is that the first mental skill athletes should learn and focus on is awareness. And with a lot of athletes, dance does this. I'm sure other athletes do it. You see the really hard tricks, the really cool things, and you want to go do the really hard thing and you like skip the basics. And I think mental toughness is the same thing. Well, people were like, I need confidence. I need to, get over my perfectionism. And I'm like, even if that's true, that's great, but we actually need to back up. We need to start with the foundation of that very first mental skill, which is basic awareness. And really, I just mean like being able to understand what your thoughts really are and when they change and how that is impacting you. A lot of athletes will aren't even aware of how bad the self-talk is or like what's triggering it to happen. That awareness piece is really like that foundation. We got to start there. And then that way, any skill that I teach you after that, you have the awareness to notice when it's working and when it's not, and when you should be practicing it.
I love that.
Yeah, that's I think that might be synonymous to like I always speak on vision and not just the ability to see, like the vision of the scenario. And I think that's probably might even be a better word as far as an awareness, because everything from okay, where are you competing? How are you practicing? Who's involved? What does the team dynamic look like? Who's good at what? Positioning them accordingly if you're a coach. There is so much, and I love that you start with awareness, because there's one of the I live my life by one-liners, and there's something that goes along the lines of to have sight with no vision is just a shame, essentially. I think it's a Gandhi quote of some sort. That's not a true quote, so don't quote me on that. But to have sight and no vision, or and in this case scenario, to have talent or skill and no awareness is can definitely be, I wouldn't say just as dangerous, but just as big of an impact in one way or the other. So to have the skill, like you said, to take action in that sooner and not just 2 weeks before. This isn't a rah session. This is something that can literally change the trajectory of a team, is having, the mental aspect and awareness and toughness.
Yeah. And with all of these mental skills, like the way to get better at it is to practice it under lower stakes. Like practice it when it's not a big deal, so that when you are at a national championship, you can do it. And I mean, I think getting away from dance, if you watch the college football national championships, Michigan's quarterback had a really intentional mindfulness reset that he does before every game, but he's done it before every game for years. And so at the national championship, he was able to rely on that and do it. And I'm not entirely sure, but it looked like he redid it at fourth quarter, which he doesn't normally do. But as if you've been repeating it and had that consistent routine, then when you get to the high pressure national title, it's like it works in the sense that now I can calm myself, I can focus on what I need to, I can block out the distractions. But if you don't practice that until 2 weeks out, it's not going to work for you. It has to be a skill that you build up to in lower pressure situations so that it's there for you in the high pressure moments.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Where do you want to go from here?
Keep going. Being that you're the dance expert on this squad, you just keep going and I'll just keep filling in on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, I think with mental toughness too, with like coaches, how they can also foster that. Cause I mean, I coach high school right now. Last year I coached college. And I think high school is harder, honestly, to foster the skills, the mental skills, because one, they're younger, and two, they have influence of parents and siblings and other people that they already have skills from and characteristics from that you're kind of either maybe reteaching or kind of turning around to how they're going to work best.
And a maturity standpoint.
Yeah, and there's just so much maturity standpoint there. So as a coach, how would you foster mental toughness?
Yeah. That's the big question. How do we create this?
Tell me the
and
secret.
I know. Well, it's like most things. It's like there's not a silver bullet, but there is a tactic. Like you can.
Yeah.
So really what it comes down to is creating opportunities for small challenges regularly so that athletes are not just in their box of comfort. It's like, how do I get a little out of your comfort zone every day and know that you can push that? And so it's offering lots of small challenges within a climate of support and care and feedback. So there's the climate in the environment and the actual challenge. So if you put the two together, that's when this works, right? If you just throw challenges at athletes, but it's in this negative, nasty, old school coaching model, I would say. That's when you have athletes who get anxiety, who quit, who can't handle it. And if you just have this positive coaching environment with no challenge, that's where you have the like, this is fun rec, and that's great, and it has its place. But if that's not what you want, it has to have both. So the mental toughness comes often the coach believes that athletes are capable of more before they do, right? The athlete are like, no, I can't do that, or that's too hard, or that's too much. And then the coach has to have the expertise to know, like, safety and physically all that. Yes, you can. So I'm going to push you. I believe you can do this. We're going to put this challenge out there. Are you ready? Are you going to do this with me? And keep showing them that pushing yourself a little bit, and then how to respond when like, okay, you tried and it didn't work. That's okay. What do we do with that? Or let me give you feedback on how to be better. How do you receive the feedback in a way that's not threatening and I'm just trying to get better? And that goes back to parents, like you were saying too. There are definitely high school athletes that I have coached and mentored as well, that their athletic coach is the first person to really push them out of the box.
Yeah.
And that's hard. To have a 14, 15-year-old who's like, wait, this is hard. I can't do it. And no one has ever really shown them the value of being positively challenged in that way. So that, like I said, sometimes you have to rewrite things a little bit of like, a challenge is good. Like that's, my kids are still relatively young, but my 7-year-old will parrot that. You said you're the one-liner. That's my kids will say all the time. A challenge is good. Challenge is good. Challenge is good. It's like, that's one thing I'm going to hammer home. So long-winded a bit. That's the idea of like presenting the challenges in an environment that's going to help support it so that there's the care and like that mental health support with it. Because the challenge I hear from a lot, I bet you guys are hearing it too, is like coaches are scared to push too hard in this age where we are more aware of mental health, which is wonderful. Like, I think it's great that we are having better conversations around how do we care for our athletes. But mental toughness and mental health are not the same thing. And I think they get mixed. So you can protect mental health and you can look out for, red flags. And there's mental health first aid classes. Like you can look for those, but yet challenge your athletes and increase their mental toughness. And that comes with presenting challenges, the scaffolding for how to achieve that challenge in a positive environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought that up. And the encouraging part of this that I will tell you as well is that we are hearing something similar to that. But what's nice to hear is a lot of these coaches, it's not that they're scared. They're honestly, a lot of them are admitting, I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Which is
fair, right?
We're also trying to have people like you and collaborate and share stuff out, because we might not have the answer for everything, like personally here in house yet. And we're not going to claim the two of us, the four of us, the six of us that are here to try to do it all. So we want to put people like you and ourselves in front of people like that and in front of coaches quicker, sooner, faster.
Yeah.
So that way they can ask better questions, get better answers. So that's kind of the good thing too, is it's like, what I feel like I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's like, it's not even that they're scared, which is fine. Like, I'd rather them avoid because they don't know how, or to be able to say like, I just don't know where to go, versus being, because then you give them the tools that they need, and then they still have that blurred line, like you said, is it's like mental toughness and mental health are two different things, and they still don't know how to walk that line. So some of the resources that you have and what you've already spoken is just so great, and a lot of coaches are going to hear this. So listen to what we're all saying. Now there's power in numbers. And you said something too, as far as some of the student athletes and the coaches being the first ones to put them out. It's amazing, or push them out of the box. It's amazing how
Yeah.
our minds are they're defaulted into comfort, right?
Right.
Don't be too ambitious. Don't hurt yourself. Like everything's comfort. Shy away. I can't do that. I don't know if I can. And also too, that's also why I think there's two people I feel like that student athletes kind of tune out very quickly, and it's their parents and then their coaches for similar and separate reasons. And I think that push, and student athletes that listen to this, listen up. They're pushing you for a reason, because you can do it, not because you have to do it. So if you're being pushed, know that it's because you can, not because you're necessarily needed to. Because at the end of the day, there's somebody that can do it, that can take your spot. So if you're being pushed, don't take it as don't default to resentment and start to tune your coach out as that second person, because you're being asked to, because the ability is there. There's something being seen in you that is why you're being pushed. It's kind of like, you find that cute girl on campus and you start picking on her because you're attracted to her. It's the same thing from a coaching standpoint. It's like we're pushing you because we are attracted to the talent that you have and the ability that you have. So that's so good for people to hear. And
Absolutely.
I think more of this is going to be a huge resource.
Thank you. And how you receive feedback is a huge mental skill in itself. Like you're saying, coaches, if they're offering feedback, if they're trying to correct your skill, it's because they believe you're capable of doing more. And when I was an athlete, I have a very vivid, like I know exactly when that mindset shifted for me and it changed my training. But coaches, we know that we're saying it from that place. Like, of course, I'm only telling you this because I want to help you. And I'm a coach for a reason. Like, I want to make you better. But yet it gets received as they think I suck. I'm terrible at this. I'll never be a starter. And there's this communication disconnect because you said there's the default of no one has ever believed in me and shown it in that way. So then this must mean I'm not good enough. Or just the natural developmental process of teenagers where we tend to assume negative intent, or we tend to assume they must think something bad of me. We have that negative comparison. So that's the default. So for coaches, I think we have to like explicitly say out loud sometimes of like, I'm saying this because I believe you're capable of more, and this is how we're going to get there. Do you want to work this with me? And where we didn't, I will speak to myself coaching 20 years ago. I didn't used to say it out loud. It was more, it felt more understood. And I think we took that for granted, and we need to say more exactly what we are trying to accomplish with the feedback and where it's coming from. And not every time you say it, but like reiterating that with your athletes so they understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think that goes right along with, we've talked about validation and confidence in athletes. And I've said on here before, like every team that I've been on, the validation of how we're doing, how a dance looks is always come from our coaches. And that's something that whenever I started coaching, I was like, no. Before you even look at me, like you're going to clap for yourself and you're going to feel how you want to feel about your, in this case, your full out or something. And then you're going to get my validation, not based on, like your feeling is not based on how I'm going to tell you it looked. It's going to be based on your own thing.
Absolutely. And I definitely encourage coaches, like when those athletes are like, how was that? Was that okay? Was that better? Was that, I'm like, how did it feel? Like, what do you think? Like, put it there first. And that's back to awareness. Because if an athlete is not aware of like, no, that actually, that rep was better, or that skill was better. If they're really not sure, then you have an awareness issue. Like they need to start to build that sense of self and their proprioception, their physical self of like, can I tell if that was better or not? And then, like you said, validate and give feedback and can move to that, but building the awareness and letting them see first and validate for themselves. Because especially as a coach, you're not going to see every athlete and everything they do. So if you don't have a comment to offer an athlete, that shouldn't be the end of their sense of success. It's like, well, coach didn't see me, so it sucked. I'm like, no, coach didn't see you. So how did it go? Like, do you feel like it was good? Like, take it personally first before looking to that coach. Yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah. And same thing with that too. Like not only coaches aren't going to see a lot of things, but your parents really don't see much either. Like I know it, dance specifically, like you don't really see anything other than the end product. And by that point, it's like, it looks great, but it's really important to remember like the amount of work that they put in before that, and to validate them for that reason, and not just, oh, that one run on the stage wasn't my favorite, sweetie.
Yeah. More so, I always challenge parents and coaches to pay attention to what you're praising and what you're rewarding, right? And focusing on that. It's the effort and the growth and not the outcome.
Yeah.
And as much as you can focus there, that's how you help shift that mental toughness.
Yeah, I love
Am I
that.
validating your thoughts? You're very excited over
Yeah.
there.
Oh man. Well, I mean, so I'll encourage you to listen to the previous guest podcast we had with Will Johnston, because that was literally that's been January in a nutshell. We've learned from each other through that podcast, and you're speaking the same thing. It's just it's not ironic. It's grand design.
Cool.
Yeah, it's God has a mission. Not
Yeah.
it's just it's the way it works. But that was one of the things we just put out as a reel and a one-liner was don't praise the statistic. And your outcome doesn't define you.
Yeah.
But the statistic is actually the title of the podcast, and it's just that. And your outcomes don't define you. And what's been a lot of fun is I'm learning this too, and I'm trying to forge this mission as well. We're on the exact same page, to the point to where my kids, we have 2, 4, and 6. My 2-year-olds are Cancer. That's our daughter. My 4 and 6-year-old are playing hockey, and they'll get in the truck now after hockey practice on Saturday. And the first thing they say now is, man, they'll tell me what they're proud of. And man, I was really proud with how I skated today. I was really proud with the goal I scored today. And then they go, and then they know what I'm going to ask next. And they'll say, this was the most fun. This is what I want to work on. And this is how I want to go about working on it. Yep. And so it's just right on line with exactly what you're saying, because it does comes back to awareness, and it's not awareness with what's happening between the lines, we'll say. It's the awareness of how the team's responding, how they're reacting. What are you trying to do from a coach's standpoint to really make sure the dancers in this case fulfill themselves? And I love that. How do you think it went is so good.
Yeah. And I think dance is such a hard sport to do that with too, because most of the time you're in front of a mirror all the time. You're looking at yourself, you're comparing yourself to others. And then when it comes to like dance team, for say, you're always getting shown videos, and like it's just such a individualized sport sometimes, but it doesn't have to be, and it really shouldn't be.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I was thinking, as you were just talking about that I call it good, better, how. It's exactly what I would tell athletes to do. That's part of awareness. Like when you're done with practice, or you're done with a game or a performance, what was good? What do you want to be better? And how are you going to actually do that?
Yeah.
And the how part, and goes back to praise and awareness and all of that. It's my big challenge and my one-liner, I guess. Apparently I use those a lot too. Is control the controllables, and just constantly thinking about like what is in your control as an athlete, or what is in your control as a coach. Because if you're looking for validation elsewhere, or you're waiting for the judges' scores, or you're waiting to see if coach is going to let you start or not, like that is all, a lot of that is out of your control. And you can really only control your actions, your concentration, and your effort. And so if you're able to bring your focus back to those things, then that helps with all the outcome stuff. Because you're saying with dance, especially in all subjective sports, and there's, a lot of sports out there that involve judging, and you can't get attached to those outcomes. And even sports that are not that way, like you still have to separate, because things are going to happen, flukes are going to happen. And if you're attached to an individual outcome, it's where you have a lot of the negative side, the burnout, the quitting, the negative self-talk. And so being able to focus on like control the controllables, and bringing awareness back to like, what is in your control? What do I need to let go of? I can't do anything about that. So I'm going to focus here. And that helps with kind of the mindset in practice, the mindset within a competition, being able to kind of reset when you need it, and all that.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because about a couple days ago, my team was going through that. I coach at Francis Howell. I think you've been there before.
I have been there, absolutely.
And so our JV team didn't make Jazz finals, and that's like, it was a huge blow to them, and like they don't understand and whatever, which is obvious, a validating feeling to feel. But I just want to commend them, because honestly, better than myself, they like immediately rallied. They're like, we have things to do in hip hop and game day, and like they were rare and ready to go. And like I think it speaks a lot to that program and like the coaching style that they had, because unlike them, I was like, this is so stupid. Like, whatever. I was like, I need to go take a walk. I need a second. But in reality, I was like, no, you can deal with your feelings later, because when you look at scores, it really wasn't anything that they did. It was the best run they could have ever had. But sometimes, like you say, in subjective sports, like they just don't like it. And that's okay too. And it's okay they really like rallied around, and it was a lot of like mental toughness that honestly they showed me. So like your athletes are going to also teach you things.
Of course. And that's the mental toughness that we were saying that's built all year. If you haven't been training mental toughness, that's the moment they're going to fall apart.
Right.
When your first routine doesn't go well and you have 2 more to go, if you haven't been training mental toughness, everything's going to fall apart from there. But if you've been training it all year, then that's when it falls into place. And that's just like, how do you talk about failure? And is failure falling out of a pirouette across the floor? Is failure like one mistake in a game day, or is failure, like, what does that look like and what happens? Or do you pick yourself up and keep going? Does your teammate, continue to encourage and challenge you? Does your coach give you, feedback about how to make it better? And, there's nothing wrong with, like, what is a mistake and what is success? And if that conversation has been happening all year, then in those big clutch moments, you have the mental toughness. And so again, when you were asking, like, how do you teach that? I'm like, it's how you handle all the little tiny mistakes and challenges and sense of success, and defining that all year so that it's there at the nationals.
So here's what I want you to hear. That was all based on your coaching. And like you said, we learn a lot from our athletes. And I think you need to realize, Erin, that you are a great coach, and it wouldn't they wouldn't have responded like that, like you said, because that's been coached all year. And I would be on the straight and narrow if she was my coach. But it's things like that. It's what you demand of them and everything you've done and what you put yourself around. It's like they knew you had their back and you will take care of the emotions. And you've taught that the whole time. And so pat yourself on the back. And because you just got validated by somebody who deals with this every day, and just notice that you had a big play in that too. But yes, the program and those girls, me knowing some of those girls, for them to rally like that is huge. So, and I'm going to keep this. I love staying on the positive side, and maybe we'll just stay in the coaching realm right now.
My favorite topic.
Here's how people normally ask this question, and I want people to kind of know, like, because this is how we think. So I'm going to ask this how people would normally ask this. What do you, and then I'm going to back it up with how I want to ask it. This is how they
Okay, fair.
What are some of the key mistakes that you see coaches make when they're going and prepping for a run, whether it's how they coach or how they speak, which is all in line with that? That's how people normally ask that. So let me flip this into positive. What is some of the best coaches that you've seen and worked with who are very successful with their teams, no matter where they go, even if they've transitioned from team to team? What are some of the common things that the best coaches have and do along? And I think we've already answered this, but I kind of want to summarize and really in on what do some of the best coaches do very consistently from a coaching standpoint.
Love it. And I will say my answer comes from being a coach, but actually it's really backed in research. So this is where, if I put my academic hat on, this has been researched extensively across all kinds of different sports, men and women, team sports, individual sports, college to Olympics, like it's in high school, everything. So it's, there's a couple things. Having what's called a democratic coaching style, but having a style where you include the athletes in decision making, where they have some autonomy, they have some ownership of what's going on. The opposite of that is the autocratic, my way or the highway, shut up and do as I say coach. The dictatorship is the problem. So it's the opposite of that. The democratic coach, that style tends to be much more motivational to athletes, makes them want to work hard, because again, there's the ownership. Like, I'm a part of this, I belong here, I want for everyone on the team to succeed. So I'm going to do my part so that the team is its best. You're not creating the internal competition. So there's that democratic coaching style. And then it's what we were talking about with that, the climate, that creating an atmosphere of kind of back to like the definition of success. And is success only competitive, or is success everybody against themselves?
Right.
And so it's like how you set up a drill, how you set up your practices, how you talk about who did well in games. Like, it's setting up the expectation that success is improving against yourself, rather than, running a drill till you get to one winner. It's like, let's run something so that everybody's improving on themselves and comparing to their own growth. And so your star athlete is pushing to improve, and your brand new rookie is also pushing to improve. And there's not that comparison between the two. So it's defining success as individual growth and effort, because that goes back to motivation, and athletes are going to want to work harder. So when you see the teams that are more successful, their athletes want to be there for their own growth, and then they want the success of the team first. So it's not worrying, like, and in dance, right? It's like the back row is just as important as the front row. And we,
Yep.
coaches, we know that, like, my back row dancer has to hit it just as much as my front row. It doesn't matter. And so, but you have to create that climate. Everybody has a role. Everybody's contributing. Even if you have alternates and you're not on the floor, what is your role? How do you contribute to this program? So creating that overall environment where success is in your control, it's in your individual control, and focused on individual growth with that, like, democratic style, I would say, are two of the big things.
Love. I love that. I feel like I like sit here. I'm like, oh yeah, I do that. I do that.
Yeah.
Of course.
Kind of a good validation day for me, I think.
Good.
Yeah, well, we have very high standards and expectations for ourselves,
Yeah.
especially here with what we're doing. And so it is nice to hear. It is nice to have that pat on the back.
Yeah.
We always say teacher learns the most. So
absolutely. And high expectations are good, like, of yourself, of them, of, like, yeah. And I think as coaches, again, we're in this industry because we are naturally kind of wired for that, like, constant improvement. Like, that's how coaches in sports and athletics always works. And it's just cultivating that in your athletes to find that same drive where it's, how do you talk about mistakes and failure? Like, failure is part of the process. Failure is something we embrace. This is a good thing. It's just about what you learn. And so being able to take everything that sometimes I think actually comes more natural to a lot of coaches. And like you're saying, oh, I do that. It's like, because if you are a coach who's been in the industry for a while, that it might be something they're like, I just do that. I didn't realize I was actually, creating this environment. But then once you become more aware of it, you can do it more intentionally and make sure it's really there every day. So always learning. I still am too, of course.
Yeah.
I love learning.
Yep.
I think the other thing you kind of touched on a little bit, but team culture and like coaching culture, how like important that is to the success of a whole team.
It's everything for sure. And I think it's, we said it earlier, like coaching the coaches, because it starts at the top. And like, I think that's one of those, that's an important part of it. And then it's coaching your leadership. So that's a level that I didn't pay attention to as much early on. And the more I coached and the more I've consulted now, that leadership coaching is huge, of being able to take, they could be a formal captain, but they may not be. Sometimes your most influential athlete is just a really outspoken sophomore. Like, it doesn't have to be a captain, but like talking to your leaders who have the influence to make sure that they're in line with your vision. And you were saying how like athletes start to tune out their parents and their coaches. That's true. And who are they listening to? Right? They're listening to their peers. So being able to get your key 2-3 athlete leaders in line with your vision, parroting what you're saying, backing you up when you're not there, right? Like, that has a lot of success with the culture, because you can't go against that whole team. You can, it just takes a lot longer. But if you can get those leaders to come with you, it helps. So that they're reinforcing the whole culture, and then it's the passing it down. And I know, like, Hal does this, and like the really successful teams, it's like, the leaders teach the culture to the newbies. You kind of don't even have to anymore. You just live it. You keep modeling it, but they are teaching the next ones who teach the next ones to teach the next ones. And it's just about like, this is our legacy and this is what we do here. And if you're a part of this program, this is kind of how we are. So
that's what I was about to say, is like how to maintain that culture year by year. And even like we've talked about this before, when there's coaching changes, like the culture shouldn't change unless the coach comes in and is a completely different, like you say, like dictatorship version. But really, like, your culture of your program, it doesn't matter, dance, soccer, football, really shouldn't change based on the leadership. So I love that you said that.
Right. Yeah. Like the values might shift a little bit. And I talk to coaches a lot about, like, you need to know your own personal coaching values and not just try to emulate somebody else.
Right.
Usually in those early coaching years, we coach however we were coached, or we just try to emulate someone we admire. And that works at first, and that's great. But eventually you need your own. And so you might have somebody who has a slightly different, core values as a coach, but you have to come together on the same vision. So even like having an assistant who has slightly different values can be challenging. Like, you need to make sure that you guys are aligned in what the program is trying to be, even if there's those subtle differences, because otherwise your priorities are completely different, and it changes all your decision making.
She brought up something that we did at the recovery night before you guys left.
Mhm.
And I literally told one of her dancers that was here. We do recovery nights here where they can use the hallway. We do like an ask us anything session before they start. And one of her dancers, they were all kind of pointing the finger at this one in particular dancer because she is the spoken one and she will ask the
Yeah.
questions of, like,
Yeah.
why are we doing this, or should
Yeah.
we do that, or can we do
Mhm.
this? And or when she's in other scenarios, she will still speak up. And I told her, I said, keep asking the questions. And everybody's kind
Yeah.
of me. I was like, who else has the guts to ask the questions that she's asked? And they're like, oh, I was like, that's why you
No.
want her asking the questions. And I said, that gives you something to work on in yourselves that aren't asking the
Mhm.
questions. And the reason you aren't asking them, we can dive down the road of the insecurities, the uncertainties, the comfort of why you're not asking the question. But having those people, like you said, maybe she's not a
Yeah.
captain, but she is the outspoken one that's going to uncover a lot of great things. And
Mhm.
then the team should know, like, I trust her because she's willing to ask.
Yeah.
You set that culture. Because what I'm
Yeah.
finding out right now, and as my brain is spinning learning from you, is it's like going into my science background of biochemistry, it's like all a team is across athletics is a petri dish. And
Yep.
what you put
Oh
in there
yeah.
to feed it, you
One
know,
bad thing.
yeah, it's like putting a bad orange next to all the good oranges you just bought, and it's like
Right.
but that
And it's
is
over.
from the top down. You as the scientist of the group, essentially, you're putting things in positions. Whatever you're dropping into that petri dish, you're hoping
Mhm.
it grows or doesn't. And if something grows and it shouldn't have, then at least you can, if you coached from that aspect, you know exactly where to go to fix it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm kind of creating analogies in my head as we are, kind of focusing on from top down leadership.
Yeah.
We
Of
could
course.
talk
I
about this
totally
all
agree.
day long, so I should probably start to really segue this into downhill. But I do want to ask kind of maybe not a tougher question, but a more intense question from the opposite perspective, if I can.
Sure.
Um, I do love the student athlete side and pouring into them and getting them to be very raw and kind of jar them a little bit and make them deal with some things.
Mhm.
So along that line, what would you say for the student athlete side? We're going to talk to the student athlete now. And what would you say maybe a more, I don't want to phrase this, a more dangerous characteristic of an athlete? What would be maybe a dangerous characteristic of an athlete that the athlete themselves should be aware of that doesn't create toxicity in a team? Because that is consistent. You're going to have it on every team, especially at a young age where it's like, and they don't know it. Like they might
Mhm.
not trying to be toxic, or they're not trying to create a cancer in the locker room, as we would say. Um,
Mhm.
what would you say is one of the leading factors or characteristics of an athlete that might start to edge that way, so we can maybe make them more aware and have them look in the mirror and be like, "Ooh, is that me?"
Yeah. That's a great question. I was just talking to a couple athletes the other day, and I saw it in one uh, that it's there's a couple. Okay, I'd say one is like, what is their view of success? And for the ones where success is purely outcome driven, like this team is not good enough unless we win. I am not good enough unless I'm the best at this. Like my
Mhm.
teammate is fallen short unless they're absolutely perfect. And so it's that strive for perfection, and nothing short of perfection and first and the best is enough. And like, yes, you can be super competitive. That's great. Like I think that's misnomer too, that people like, well, then I can't be competitive. Have a drive. Like I want you to want to win. Like
Right.
that's great. And I'm not taking
Right.
that from you, but it's your definition of success. And what I challenge the athletes on teams for is that they get mad at a teammate or perceive a teammate as being lazy. Right. And then it starts to create this issue of like, they're being lazy. They're not fighting hard enough. They made the same mistake again and they're
Right.
getting mad, and trying to have them flip to like, what would you need to see to
Mhm.
know that they're working really hard? And the thing they want to see is perfection. I'm like,
Mhm.
you don't want to see perfection. You want to see progress. And the only way, like, if you want to see perfection, they're going to only do the thing they're good at and never try anything new. Then the whole team is stuck. If you're seeing mistakes because they're pushing for something new, that's how the team's going to get better. Like what you want to see is people trying hard, making a mistake, taking feedback, and trying again. Like that's success and progress. And so not judging your fellow teammates on mistakes is a bad thing. It's how they respond to the mistakes, right? If they're
Mm.
taking that information and pushing forward. So to be clear, that push, I think the big thing is that need for perfection and in themselves and their teammates, and that nothing short of that is good enough. And then the other one is the ones that have more of the natural desire to have a constant ranking. Who is the best on the team? Who is, who is getting the most reward and praise and, time from the coach or, outside media information. Like it's looking for that natural ranking and putting themselves above everybody else.
Yeah. That's, I mean, see that multiple times.
Yeah.
And you bringing that up again, I just love listening to people like you talk, because it helps me be better too, because you do see that. I was one of those people. I didn't really let the results define who I was.
Right.
But in a loss, I always felt there was something I could have done better. It's like I let the team down too.
Right.
Which I think that might be the third is if you do take an L, or if it didn't go the way you wanted it to, and you didn't live up to the goals, and not that it had to be the first place trophy,
Right.
but if you didn't as a team live up to the goals, and you start to think, I let the team down, that can do two things.
Yeah.
One, it's going to kill your mental capacity and what you're able to do and your drive, and really cost you your own talents. But it can also make you look very selfish, as far as, well, you think you're just the one-man team. So be very careful.
Yeah.
And speaking from experiences, I meant it from a good way. It's like, man, I wish I could have helped more, was how I thought it in my head, but how that can be perceived is very dangerous too. And I think, the ones that you gave are so good. And I don't know. I think this is exactly what people need to hear, and from both sides. And I just love where this is headed.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking to a very high profile college dance coach. So in the dance world, high profile, everybody like knows and respects her. And that was her big advice too, was like, the only way you've really failed is like, or the only way you let everyone down on the team is if you quit, like, or if you stop trying, right? Like, you're gonna make a mistake. Somebody's gonna do something on the nationals floor. Like, it's gonna happen. We're not gonna have perfection right now. So but the only way you let us down is if you stop trying, or if you aren't giving your full effort. So as long as you're giving your full effort, we're good. And that's when you see routines in the dance world, or when you see athletes who have like their peak performances, it's because there's not the pressure to be perfect.
Right.
That pressure is going to crush it. Yeah.
Well, where else do you want to go before we wrap this up? Anywhere?
Let's think. I think there any like practical tips or techniques that people can apply like right now that's going to help them maybe in their summer season, even next year. Just things that people can do now that are going to help them.
Sure. I guess I would start with awareness, since I said that was the first one. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
And taking a minute to do some genuine reflection, and I kind of think about it, like what's the vision? What do you want the end of your season to look like? If you're mid-season, or you're about to start your season, or, to do in your off season, what do you want your season to look like? And then what is getting in the way mentally and physically? And that awareness helps athletes a lot to see like, okay, what's getting in the way mentally is like my need for comparison, or my need for coach's validation, or my perfectionism. What's getting in the way physically might be like a poor diet, or I'm not sleeping because I'm on my phone, or I'm not prioritizing, my friendships, like that. What's getting in the way mentally and physically? And then that goes to the controllables. So if all these things are getting in the way, what's in your control that you can do something about? And like, rather than just being in this place of all these things are stacking up against me, this is going to be so hard. Like, okay, everybody has that. So what's in your control, and what are you going to change about it? And having more of that autonomy, like own it, control it. Like, you can do a lot to have the best season that you can possibly have, rather than just sort of riding it. Like, I think we get into a competitive season and it just is like, you're on a freight train and you just let it go. And there's no changing.
Right.
But there really is great opportunity to just pause and say, okay, maybe that competition wasn't what I wanted. Maybe that individual practice wasn't what I wanted. What got in the way of that today? And can I control that to be better tomorrow? And so looking at that, what's getting in the way, and what can you control to fix it in the future?
Love that.
Well, I think I have 3 rapid fire questions to wrap this up with.
Oh, sure.
All right. And it's kind of going to be on the same topic, but the first one I want to ask is, what would you say is the most important time frame of an athlete's season?
Preseason.
Bingo. I knew she was going to say.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Ding. All right.
Okay, good. I'm glad we agree. That was my rapid fire automatic answer.
Preseason,
Preseason.
off-season. Yes. Yes.
Off season. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Dance. I was like, dance doesn't have an off season.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know.
like
Nothing does anymore.
We call it, one of my good friends calls it improvement season. And I'm like,
I
I
like
love
that.
that.
I might
That's
use
exactly
that.
what that is.
Yeah.
Because you're still training. But
Yes.
yes, improvement season is my answer.
Okay. Boom. Bingo. All right. We'll elaborate on that on another day. Second one is well, let's come at this from the aspect of, so we have nationals coming up for college. So we see quite a few college dancers, and we also have
Mhm.
another, which one is it? NDA or
Yeah,
UDF?
NDA both
Yeah,
college
NDA.
school are coming up.
In March, right?
And then
Yep.
state for our state is very soon.
Okay. So
Mhm.
going into this next round of nationals, we'll say, especially in collegiate nationals and high school nationals in March, what would you say, and you probably already answered this, but rapid fire, what are some things they can do now to potentially make whatever their form of success is, to just be a more, to make more steps towards progress before nationals? What are some
Yeah.
things that teams can do now this late in the season? Because again, we're
Yep.
6 weeks away.
Right. Yes. I think it's talk about success. What is success in your program? How do you define it? And make sure it's in your control so that you have a very clear laid out. I know what I need to do for this next 6 weeks to make sure that I have my best chance for performance. So yeah, what is success? Your clear definition of it that's in your control that gives you the action steps of what to do for the next few weeks.
And then as that ends and everybody returns from Orlando/Daytona,
Mm-hmm.
going into improvement season, what does that look like going into 2024-25 season? What are a couple of those things that, okay, now you're post nationals, no matter the outcome, what's
Mhm.
improvement season
Right.
start to look like?
That's the beginning of the awareness. Tons of reflection time, like really stop and think about it. What did you learn? What went well? Where were there challenges? And before you start planning the next season, and so many of us do this, like you are on the flight home from nationals thinking about what choreo you're going to be doing next time. Like we all go straight there.
I don't have a
you out,
jazz song
Erin.
already picked. Yeah, I don't already have the jazz song picked out. What are you talking about?
Right. I know. So we go straight there. And usually because we leave inspired, right?
Yeah.
So it's good when we're excited. But taking that, like forcing that reflection about and it's personally as a coach too, I will look at that like work life. I call it work life blend. It's not a balance, it's a blend of
Love
what did
that.
that look
Harmony.
like. And but what did that look like? And did I feel really frantic for the 3 weeks before nationals? Okay, why? Is there something in my control around that I can do differently?
Yeah.
Was there a culture thing that didn't quite hit home? Do I want to change that? So taking a lot of time, I have a whole series of reflection questions I can send to, but like spend some time going through that, which includes exit interviews for your dancers and not just the ones not coming back, all of them. And so taking all of this huge reflection and this information from everybody and trying to synthesize like, okay, how do I add that to my current values to make decisions about this program of what is going to stay the same, what is going to change, not trying to change everything, but picking like what's the overarching plan for the next year.
Right.
It's usually like one focus. So kind of like New Year's resolutions. I don't know if you guys do like one word instead of a resolution, but I like to look at it. I do one word. And then as a coach for your season, it's more like same idea. Like what's the one overarching thing that's going to shift this season? And then making all your decisions around ensuring that's what happens. Because you can't overhaul everything, nothing will get done. And if you just go straight to the next one, you didn't learn anything. So that's taking a lot of time to gather information from your athletes, sit with yourself, talk to assistant coaches if you have them, and then reorient around what your vision is for that next season before you start practices.
Yeah. Last thing I would say
And
on
communicate it.
Yeah.
Make sure then you tell everybody what you decided.
Yeah, if you're already jumping to next season, I feel like there's two different things. It's you're going to compromise culture for not sitting in the moment and enjoying what you did do and the time you spend together, win, loss, or indifferent, and honoring the time that you just had with a group of people, especially from a coaching aspect. If you're just on to the next season, you have seniors and you have juniors that see how they're going to be the seniors, and it's very, very could be very, very compromising.
Yeah.
But also, I
Absolutely.
think the second thing too is there's probably something you're shying away from that you don't want to deal with because
Yeah.
you're already on to the next thing.
Right.
So I love all those
Yeah.
answers, which is why I wanted to ask. Not that I knew what you were going to say, but it just, I mean, I'm stoked with even in the dance world, it's like we're leaning more and more towards dance by demand at this point. And so
Mhm.
for everybody listening is like, yes, we do have a lot of dance resources and we do talk dance a lot, but I think you can also hear how this transcends across all teams. I mean, a team's team,
Absolutely.
these are all still people. These
Mhm.
athletes are still
Yeah.
people that you're dealing with. And just because they're dancers doesn't mean they think any different than football players or hockey or lacrosse or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. So,
Right.
um, such a huge resource. We always would love to do part twos and continuations with people. So I
Of
hope we
course.
can have you for a part two.
I'd love to.
We did listen to the podcast of the dance coach, I believe you were referring to. Uh,
I was like, well, it came out about 8 hours ago. So if you
I
did,
already
I don't know.
listened.
I was like, that published this morning.
yeah. So yeah, we have been informed on who that was.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, she's amazing.
but thank you very, very much for dropping all
Of
kinds of
course.
knowledge and being available to come on with us as we're trying to forge something pretty big and would love to continue the relationship and hopefully we'd love to potentially even have you in a deeper role here locally.
Yeah.
We can talk
I
about
would love to. I appreciate what you're doing. It's so nice to find people who are on a similar mission of like just trying to help improve athletes in a more
Yeah.
well-rounded way. So I absolutely appreciate what you guys are doing as well. And thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed. Dr. Chelsea Pierotti, we will put every link we can in the comments. Go ahead and share this out as you guys see it. We thank her. We thank you all for listening. And we look forward to our next episode in our part 2 with Dr. Chelsea here later in the year, hopefully, as maybe we'll get into the improvement season.
Yeah.
We'll let the
I would
improvement
love that.
be in
Yeah.
the middle of that, and we'll start to talk about the improvement season and going into the start. So hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, whenever you're listening. See ya.
Bye.